How do you grow in a down market? When you hire a salesperson or a broker, what qualities do you look for? What makes a good broker? What makes a bad broker? I'd like to welcome our listeners to the Boulos Beat podcast. I'm your host, Greg Boulos. The Boulos Company is Northern New England's largest commercial real estate services firm with offices in Portland, Maine, as well as Manchester and Portsmouth, New Hampshire. We've been selling and leasing real estate in Maine and New Hampshire since 1975. This podcast is designed to provide insight into Maine's business movers and shakers. And speaking of business leaders, I'd like to welcome Chris Lynch to the Boulos Beat. Chris is 59 years old and the founder and CEO of Legacy Properties, Sotheby's International Realty, with 6 locations throughout Maine, from Kennebunk to Northeast Harbor, and headquartered in Portland at 2 City Center. Chris is from Massachusetts, but grew to love Maine as a Bates College student. In a prior life, Chris had a 17-year career as an investment banker on Wall Street, as managing director, principal, and global head of investment-grade bond department at DLJ in New York City. From there, he retired in his 40s and moved to Maine. Chris lives in Cape Elizabeth with his wife, Laura. He has 4 grown children, Andy, Jake, Emily, and Allie, and last but not least, the family's beloved cockapoo, Lucy. While it did not start out as a family business, son Andy and daughter Allie both work with Chris. Welcome, Chris. Chris, I love the story of how you happened to come to Maine and buy the home you still live in out in Cape Elizabeth. Can you tell us about how you happened to come to Maine and buy that house?
I was on vacation in Rhode Island, and my wife and I, and at the time 3 going on 4 very young children, she was pregnant with our 4th at the time, were looking for a place to live. And we decided after I left Wall Street and that I didn't need to be in the New York City area, we wanted to raise our kids someplace that was a little kinder, a little gentler, where they could stay young a few years longer and grow up a little more slowly. And it was a very fast pace in the greater New York area, as you can imagine. And we were on vacation in Rhode Island on the beach, and my kids were playing with a couple of other kids. And at the end of the day, the dad and I start talking, and I said, "Oh, we're looking for a place to live." So Cape Elizabeth's that place.
And you were talking with
Dave Sherman.
So
yeah.
Dave Sherman is from Cape Elizabeth.
Yeah, he lives in Cape Elizabeth.
And you just randomly happened to run into him?
Randomly happened to run into him because our kids were playing together on the same beach, Fenway Beach in Weekapaug, Rhode Island. And they had been playing all day. At the end of the day, I went down to watch the kids, and Dave walked over, introduced himself. We started chatting and mentioned I went to Bates College, and that kind of led to the Maine thing. And Dave said, "Oh, I'm from Cape Elizabeth." And so, I'd never been there, but he said that when I described what we were looking for a place that was connected to the rest of the world, but also had sort of a summer vacation lifestyle, but the infrastructure for a young family, where it had schools and parks and sports and programs and things, and a healthy sort of lifestyle. And at the end of that 5-minute discussion, Dave said, "You should go look in Cape Elizabeth." And a week later, maybe 2 weeks later, we said just randomly, so let's take a drive up. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Never been to Cape Elizabeth before, and ended up shortly thereafter buying the house that was next door to the one he grew up in.
Now, you've been married to Laura for 31 years.
31
which
years.
Congratulations, that's incredible.
It's flown by.
Was she on board with you starting Legacy Properties, Sotheby's?
So she, like everybody else, it was something. Again, it was an idea. I didn't have a real estate background. I had come to Maine, and it took a couple of years, and really was trying to decide what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was just about 40 years old, and so I came up with the idea of joining up with Sotheby's International Realty, really because Maine has this beautiful asset, right? It's a global lifestyle destination where even people who haven't been here before have this vision of how beautiful
Sure.
it is. And when I heard about the Sotheby's International Realty affiliation coming up for Maine, I thought, well, if you put a global lifestyle brand and a global lifestyle destination together, sort of like chocolate and peanut butter. It's like the Reese's commercial. It just seemed to me to make so much sense. At the time, it made a lot more sense to me than it seemed to make sense to anybody else. It didn't make sense really to Sotheby's because I didn't know real estate. It didn't make sense to my wife because I didn't know anything about real estate. It seemed like a big leap of faith at the time. And I was really determined to get it done, but there were lots of hurdles, and pretty much everybody was a naysayer as to whether or not it was going to be successful. Everybody was pretty sure it wasn't.
And when everybody's telling you that's a lousy idea, generally that means go for it.
It was inspiring. It really was. That's what kept me going.
You know, when you and I spoke earlier, you were telling me that people were shooting down your idea, but not only that, that you said you were going to be an unintentional, or you were an unintentional disruptor, and that part of your strategy was to redefine what it means to be local.
Sure.
What's that all about?
So, you know, when I looked at Maine, one of the things I realized having come here is I didn't know really York from Cape Elizabeth, from Camden, from MDI. I didn't know how different each of the markets are. And what I realized is many people who come to Maine and want that Maine experience don't know where they want to be, don't know where they want to go. And I thought that Maine in general, and Maine real estate in general, was not well presented. I didn't think the investment in marketing, the investment in distribution, the investment in branding that I thought could really help Maine was going on in the marketplace. So I saw that as an opportunity. And to this day, a lot of people say, well, real estate's local, but in Maine, people don't, about half the people who come here don't know really where they want to be.
Well, like yourself, really.
Really, like us. You know, and again, we heard about that one place. It was really the only place we looked. We made an offer on the house the first day we were looking. We were a great real estate client. You know, the buyer agent was thrilled. He only had to spend 3 or 4 hours with us, and we put a property under contract. And it was a little more complicated than that because September 11th kind of fell into the mix there. We made the offer the weekend before September 11th, and it was turned down. And on September 14th, we heard back from the agent saying, you know, the seller now would reconsider that offer if we were still interested in buying.
Yeah. Amazing what a terrorist attack will do.
Wow, it was just a crazy, crazy time, especially being in the New York City area. And it was one that helped us with that move, but again, it was unintentional. But the first thing I looked at was, I thought, you know, Maine is a coastal communities, which is really where we focused initially, is one asset in my mind. Is it's one big market. It doesn't just have to be Cape Elizabeth and Falmouth and Yarmouth or Kittery, York and Agunquit, Camden, Rockport, Rockland. It's one big market. And if we could figure out a way that no one had really done to service that whole market, interconnected between all of our different offices, that there was something there that I think was going to help us from the consumer perspective, the buyer perspective, in real value-added services. So.
And in the introduction, I mentioned that you have 6 locations, and they're all up and down the coast.
Yep. Southernmost in Kennebunk, then Portland, followed by Brunswick, Damariscotta, Camden, and most recently Northeast Harbor. Oh. But I opened 4 offices in about 18 months right out of the blocks in 2006 and 2007.
Yeah, just in time for 2008.
Just in time for 2008. Yeah, so
which was a recession.
Yeah, which is everybody who said it wasn't going to work in 2008, 9, and 10, they were right. It didn't work particularly well. Although I kept my nose to the grindstone, I just kept working. You know, I kept investing, I kept growing, kept advertising. We kept our staff. It was really, really difficult financial times. But I also knew that if we kept doing what we were doing, when we come out the other side, and fortunately we did, although it was a year or 2 later than I thought we would.
Right.
It was a protracted down cycle, and we had a good opportunity to grow. In fact, it created great recruiting opportunities because a lot of agents weren't doing very well. They were dissatisfied with where they were, and they gave me a chance to step in and help, and it really helped us turn the corner.
Yeah, and they called it the Great Recession for a reason.
Yeah,
it really was.
Big. It was hard. Yeah.
We're now at the tail end of COVID. Well, we hope we're at the tail end of COVID, and as we tape this in April of 2022, and things are starting to get back to normal. What types of changes have you seen in buyers and sellers' behavior pre-COVID versus post-COVID, if any?
Boy, yeah, everything has changed. I mean, our whole world has changed. You know, the buyers. So as you go back in time, and I look at 2019 as being a period of relative normalcy. 2019 was a very, very good year in Maine real estate. And at that point in time was the best year we ever had. Again, going back to 2019, most of our buyers were from Maine. Most of the money that was spent on Maine properties were Mainers buying Maine properties. Mm-hmm. What we've seen is a pretty dramatic shift of out-of-state buyers. Again, many of our buyers were financing their purchase with a mortgage. You know, we don't see so much of that anymore. We have a lot of cash coming in part because prices have gone up so much. Sellers don't want to sell their home to someone who's going to have to get a mortgage and, more importantly, have to get an appraisal because they're concerned that if the price is so high, it might not appraise. You know, is the appraisals lack the market. You know, because they're always looking backwards, and a property is under contract for 30, 60, sometimes 90 days. And the market has been moving a lot in those 90 days, and the appraisers don't have that movement.
And it's moving up.
And it's moving up.
So are these buyers coming from, what, New York, I assume? Connecticut?
So Boston, the greater Boston area, really, if you draw a line from Boston out the Mass Pike to 495 and then back around to the New Hampshire border, that's the biggest feeder market for Maine. Has been forever, continues to be. And a very, very significant part of our buyer base comes from that. Then it's New York, most recently California. We've seen a lot of growth out of California. Californians seem to be moving a lot of different places. I hear they're going to Texas and big numbers, going to Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Florida, and Maine is picking up its fair share of that. And we're seeing a lot of Florida buyers. Washington, D.C., in the last 5 to 10 years, super strong feeder has really grown a lot. And then we kind of jumped down to Florida, big back and forth market with Florida, across to Dallas, Houston, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Chicago. I mean, those are really our big feeder cities, and then there's a mix of just about everywhere else.
And I would think the Sotheby's name, because it's international, is it natural for people to call when they're looking for property in Maine from out of state?
It is, and Sotheby's has a fantastic referral network. So at this point in time, we have over 300, maybe close to 400 referrals of buyers and sellers that come from other Sotheby's agents in other markets around the country and around the world.
Right.
International has been, pretty tough, with the COVID restrictions and travel restrictions, international restrictions. So we haven't seen as much international. Canada, particularly French-speaking Canada, always been a nice feeding market for Maine. Not so much during COVID with all the border restrictions.
Well, you couldn't go from one country to the
That's
other.
it. And so that's just starting to open up now, and I presume it'll be better than it's ever been, with the pent-up demand.
Well, when you retired from DLJ, but before you started Sotheby's Legacy Properties, it was about a 4-year span.
Yep. Yeah.
What did you do? I mean, you're 40 years old, you're retired basically. What did you do during that period? Did you drive Laura crazy? Or
I didn't, but I've seen that happen to a lot of my friends.
would Laura agree with you what you just said? That
yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to ask.
We have, she is really, really good at so many things that I'm not, and I didn't mess with that. It was really, I got very busy pretty quickly. One of the things I really wanted to do was spend more time with my kids.
Right.
I was gone pretty much 6 days a week from kind of 5 a.m. to 10 p.m. And really didn't get to spend. That's why I left. That's why I left that Wall Street life. I didn't get to spend time with then my 3 kids, now 4, and with my wife. And in the times that we were together, it was stressful. It was difficult. I still had a lot going on at work. I used to have to leave from vacation to come home in the middle of vacations, and it was a very different lifestyle. I loved it. And there was so much about it. I mean, every day was so invigorating. It was like the Super Bowl. It was like getting up every morning. Yeah. And it was a lot. It was a lot for a family. It was a lot for a young family. And so anyway, she did her thing. I did my thing. I went on a couple of boards. I coached all my kids in soccer for the most part. Yeah. I did some consulting work. I did a couple of private equity raises for companies. So I was busy. It wasn't like I was just hanging around. But I was really looking at what I wanted to do next. What was going to be that business? It was going to be fun, and it was going to be engaging, and it was going to be something that would be a challenge, but would also give me the opportunity to do the things that were important to me, like spend time with my family, coach my kids, be close to home.
Right.
Yeah.
And you found the perfect business for that.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's now 16 years, and I look back and I don't know. I mean, there's always a lot of luck in all these decisions, and I think I really got lucky.
Well, lucky and smart too, right?
There was some
the combination helps.
It helps. It helps.
When you opened up for business in 2006, the internet was established, obviously, but not as ingrained in our everyday life as it is today. What changes in your business model has happened over that 16 years because of the internet?
So the internet, when you look at real estate, people say, well, real estate changed as a result of the internet. It did. It gave us a platform and an opportunity to provide a lot more information. I came from a world that was bond trading, right? And bond trading was all about information, and it was about sharing valuable information with as many people as you can, as quickly as possible, to take advantage of an opportunity in the market. Really that simple. I was on a square city block, 500 people. The ceilings were coffered so that when we would talk to certain people, it could be heard in certain parts of the trading floor. We had 100 phone lines. We had 2 handsets, each with shut-off mic buttons. And when you heard something that you thought was interesting or important that could benefit someone, you would stand up from your desk. You'd tell all the people around you so they knew. And then you get on the phone and start looking for people yourself, and it was just a big leveraged information system, right? So that was like our little internet. It was all about communication. And when I started in the real estate business in Maine, everything was kind of a secret.
Yes.
The agents didn't really share information with each other. It was counterintuitive. Information was king, knowledge is king, but everybody just kind of kept it to themselves.
That's right.
They didn't, and it took a while. And a big reason I think our culture and our company has been so successful is I started day one, and it took a couple years of getting agents and people to share information that we could help each other and leverage each other's strength and experience to be more successful. Sounds simple, but it wasn't simple. And having that background in the bond business, and again, bonds are a high value, hard to value asset like real estate is. It's a high value, hard to value asset. And good information creates good business.
And back then, teaming, which is when 2 brokers get together and work together, wasn't as common as it is today. Today, basically everybody teams. Everybody has at least 2 people on their team and shares information. And that's, from the commercial real estate perspective, that's how our business has changed. Sharing of information, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and we don't really have much team work. I mean, we have teamwork as we all work together. We're probably one of the few. We provide a lot of resources for our agents. We have we have 2 marketing people. We have broker training in-house. We have tech support in-house. We have all kinds of support. That we have a lot of agents who are just independent. They do their own thing. We had 13 agents in the top 100 in the state last year, which is a record for us and a crazy big number, but 10 of those 13 are just sole proprietors.
Really?
Yeah, they do their own thing, and we've really been able to create that platform that allows them to do that kind of business without necessarily having to team up. And as you know, teaming up, it can be expensive, and it's sometimes a part-time job just managing those relationships.
When you say expensive, how do you mean?
Well, you have to pay for a teammate. Unless 1 and 1 equals 3. Right? If 1 and 1 equals 2, you haven't really accomplished all that much.
Or if 1 and 1 equals 1.5.
And there are situations where 1 and 1 equals 1.5, and that's it probably as often as not in those team
the only reason you want a team is if 1 and 1 equals 3.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And we have a couple of really strong teams, both of which, interestingly enough, is a lead broker and 2 assistants, and they do very, very well.
In Maine, the usual brokerage model is for the owner of the company to also be a broker, and oftentimes competes with his or her sales agents. Now, you chose a different model.
I did.
Describe how your model works versus others.
It was a very purposeful decision. And again, it came a little bit from my Wall Street background where everybody on Wall Street was a producer. I mean, that was just the way it was. And as you moved up in the ranks, you were producing and managing. And as you moved further up in the ranks, you were managing more and producing less. But you were always producing. And you always hit a point where when you have 2 jobs, and they're 2 really difficult jobs that are time consuming, that you're going to fail at one and do better at the other. And again, in that environment, that culture failing just wasn't an option. And so I was one of the few people, very early on, I was probably 35 years old, where I went to my boss and said, look, I'm going to give up my production. And I'm going to just focus on doing what I do and leveraging my expertise and experience across a whole team of people, and I think we'll come out better on the other end. And he said to me, Chris, that's a big risk. And I said, I'm willing to take it. The worst thing you can do is fire me. And you face down on Wall Street every day.
Right.
I would tell Laura, a couple times a month, I can go in today, it could be my last day on the job. I made it. I'm glad I did. And but there was very little margin for error. And so when I started this business, I looked at the traditional real estate models, and I said, it just doesn't seem right to me. It seems like creating that opportunity for agents to support those agents in being successful and building those relationships, and for me to be in the background and in the foreground, going out there and helping them grow their business. And I do a lot of networking. I do a lot of travel. I do a lot of, even during COVID, I was doing some travel and some meetings, and building our network all over the country. And it's certainly helped a lot. And I think our agents have really appreciated and been the beneficiary of a lot of that work.
Because as the owner of the company, if you're privy to a lot of leads.
Sure.
And if you're cherry picking the best leads, that builds resentment
Sure
from your staff, your brokers.
Yeah.
So I think your model, I'm sure, is very attractive.
Yeah, I'm really, what I will say on the other side is, to be an owner and not a producer, is you have to have a pretty significant number of agents under you just to make a living, just to cover the overhead.
Right.
And so for me, it really wasn't until I hit about the 40 agent mark where I could make enough to actually start paying myself. And during 2009 and 10, I didn't pay myself those 2 years. I wasn't even paying rent on 2 of the buildings that I own. I was renting 2 other buildings, which I was paying the rent on. And so, I really, and that's part of being an owner, right? Is you have to hunker down when you have to hunker down. Mm-hmm. And but I hung in there for the agents, and they hung in there for me, and we came out the other side in 2011.
Yeah. Came out strong.
Came out strong.
Chris, in an article I read, you said, quote, "There are tremendous opportunities to grow in a down market," end quote. Obviously, we're in an up market right now, and there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. However, we all know at some point that will change. So how do you grow in a down market?
Well, again, we're fortunate, right, in our market position. So in a down market, there's a consumer flight to quality. If you're going to sell your house, you might not call your cousin who just got, or your nephew who just got licensed a couple of weeks ago, right? If you're at all concerned and you're looking for the best of the best, typically there's going to be that movement in a down market. If you're a buyer and you're trying to buy, again, typically you're going to want really good representation, because that strong agent in a down market can more than pay for themselves in what they might save you on the purchase price than the cost of the commission. And what we found is, even though it's an up market now, the market is so disrupted, that the supply-demand imbalance is, we've had incredible success getting our buyers under contract in multiple offer situations. That's why we're able to have 13 in the top 100. Is the people who are coming to us now are saying, yeah, there's low-hanging fruit, but the last thing I need is someone who's, I'm going to make 10 offers and not get any one of them accepted. And that's going to be over the course of 3 or 4 months, that they're making those 10 offers. It's wasted time, it's wasted energy, it's wasted money. And so what people have found is, now in a disrupted market, not just a down market, but now in an up market that's really largely dysfunctional because of the imbalance in supply and demand, is we've seen that flight to quality the other way. They're looking for expertise again. And the seller is saying, well, I don't want to just get $25,000 over my list price. I want to get $125,000 over my list price. And how do I do that? And sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But if you can, we're really good at that. That's the kind of stuff we do.
Right. Give us some general philosophies on how you run your business.
So, again, I tap into my past a lot. One of the things in my previous life that was exciting but very disruptive was awards. Is annual awards, quarterly awards, daily awards, weekly awards. It's all about awards. And when you're going to the annual banquet and 3 people of 1,000 get awards, there's at least 500 or 600 people waiting outside your office the next day to find out why they didn't get it. And they have a list of 5 pages long as to all the things they did and why they deserve it. And I realize that recognition is awesome. And I said, we recognize our agents. They're awesome. But singling out 1 or 2 every year, every period of time is more disruptive than not. And I think that's become a really important part of our culture, is there's this tremendous amount of mutual respect. And that communication helps foster that, is people aren't going to share information with other people they don't respect. And it puts a lot on me to make sure that we have the quality of people that everybody's going to respect. I don't want to be 500 agents or 400 agents.
Of mediocre.
Mediocre is, you can only, to maintain quality within the agent base, you can only grow so much. We bring on probably 4 or 5, 6 agents a year, almost exclusively replace agents who are retiring. We have a very high level of experience. Our average experienced agent is probably 20 plus years in the market. It's a different team, and it's a thoughtful team. But that's so I would say that the awards and the communication are two really, really big things with the staff. I try to be inclusive. I try to, it's a very flat curve. Right. I don't have middle management. Pretty much everybody reports to me. That's good and it's bad, because it's a lot. We take 10 staff now. We have close to probably about 90 agents in the field. That's a lot of direct reports. But it's also one that everybody's pulling in the same direction. We all know what we want to do. We all know how to accomplish it. We've done it before, and we just have to keep reinventing and reacting to the market while we're also looking forward and saying, how do we get ahead of that?
Speaking about awards, to me, in a sales organization, at the end of the day, if you're any good or not based on your production, right? And we also have a saying on our end of the business: you're only as good as your last deal.
Right.
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 And so at the end, when the fiscal year is over and you're looking at your production and it's not what you want it to be, you don't deserve an award.
Right.
Conversely, you're the top producer, you don't need an award.
That's it. And we do. What's fun and super interesting. A couple of years ago, we started doing what we call a daily activity report, and it's cobbled together. It started with my college-age daughter who was doing an internship with us, and she put together this format and a system for collecting all of our business each day. So new listings, new properties that went under contract, price reductions, which there's really no such thing anymore, and closings, properties that closed on that particular day. And every day we compile all 4 of those categories and send it out to everybody in the company. And we use Constant Contact as one of our tools. And what we see is there's over an 85% open rate by our agents on a daily basis, looking at what all of each other are doing. And through seeing that, they get to know each other, even if you're in Mount Desert and someone else is in Kennebunkport, is they get to see what each other is doing, and they get to see each other's successes. And a lot of times you'll see congratulations go back and forth. And while it sounds super simple, it really does help us connect. It's part of that communication thing. Right. And now it looks beautiful. My daughter did a great job putting it all together. And it's one that people look forward to every day, and it kind of inspires them. When it comes through and there are 20 different, pieces of business coming across that day, and the agent's like, well, I haven't closed a deal in 2 or 3 weeks. I better get back on it, or taking a victory lap when we sell a multi-million-dollar property, and that's out there, and everybody's so excited for their success. Right. And that's a nice part of the culture.
There are a lot of people either listening or watching this podcast right now who maybe think you're getting into the real estate business. When you hire a salesperson or a broker, what qualities do you look for? What makes a good broker? Yeah. What makes a bad broker?
So usually a bad start to an interview is, I want to get into real estate because I like people and I like houses. Right? That's the wrong reason. I think a lot of people look at real estate and say, boy, that's an easy business. And residential real estate is easy. It's really not. It's, we try and make it look easy, but it's a lot harder than it looks. And it's not for everybody. I think work ethic at the end of the day, for what I look for is a level of, there's a raw intelligence, work ethic, hard work, focus, diligence, and it's all-consuming. It's an all-consuming business. It's very personal. It's very emotional. It takes an incredible amount of fortitude and care for your client. You're looking out for their fiduciary interest, and we take that very, very seriously.
You have to thrive on rejection, too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Thrive on rejection is hard, but you have to be pretty thick-skinned.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you have to be pretty thick-skinned.
So you mentioned what somebody shouldn't do when they come in for an interview. Say, I love people and houses. What's a good start to an interview? Well, maybe you don't want to say, because everybody who comes for jobs.
And I would say that's a bad start to an interview. That's just a bad reason for wanting to be in real estate, because I like people and I like houses. Because again, real estate, it's all about it's fixing problems, right? You're a problem solver. It's crisis management. It's not the fun part that people get to enjoy. What I, generally speaking, someone who has done very, very well in real estate, has probably minimum 5 years experience, has tried to figure out a way to get a little bit into the higher end of the marketplace, which is where we tend to have a significant presence. But they don't have the tools. And they'll call me and say, Chris, I've been at such and such for the last 6 or 7 years. I've done really well, but I've kind of bumped up against a glass ceiling, and I just can't get to where I want to get to in my career. That to me is worth a discussion, because that's what we're uniquely able to help people make that jump if they do what we do and they do it how we do it.
So do you hire only people with experience, or?
Until very recently, I hired only people with experience. We didn't have a training program. I did, once again, get lucky, as I oftentimes do. During COVID, we had a manager of 3 offices in California, for the Sotheby's office in California, in and around Carlsbad, California. She was married to a Mainer, packed up her family, and moved from Carlsbad to Scarborough, Maine. And I brought her on, and she is an expert agent trainer. And so we've brought on not new agents, but a couple of newer agents in the last year and a half, and really put them under her tutelage, and it's gone really well. I mean, we don't have a lot of them, but the ones we have are pretty fantastic.
It's a huge learning curve.
It's a huge learning curve. Yeah. That experience piece, you can't really put a price on it. It's not something you can learn in the classroom. Right. But we have enough agents who also take them under their wing, and now training in-house and guidance. I was just on the phone driving over here with one of our newer agents, and she just put a $1.5 million property under contract.
Nice.
Today. That's a big deal for a new agent. That's quite a significant price point in Maine.
Yeah, sure is.
Yeah.
2 years ago, when the country shut down, talking about the pandemic, to stop the spread, I think the verbiage was, I was sitting at my home office and hearing crickets. I remember the first few days. And then shortly thereafter, activity in commercial real estate picked up, and I know on the residential side, activity really picked up. And I'm just wondering, why is that? Why did that happen? Because if you looked textbook, you'd say pandemic, no business, but just the opposite happened.
Just the opposite happened. So people, well, a couple things. One is, I think in residential it lasted longer because the second half of March and most of April, we had pretty significant restrictions on even our ability to show properties back in 2020.
It was all video.
Even if you couldn't even necessarily get in to do video. So that if you were a homeowner and you wanted to sell, you didn't want people in your house. And if you were a buyer and the homeowner would let you in, you didn't want to go in. And so we had a 6-7 week period that was super, super difficult and really scary. And it went on longer than that in cities like Portland and Brunswick, where they were reluctant to open up real estate showings to anyone at any time.
Because it wasn't an essential business considered.
By those cities, yeah. So the state of Maine was very quick to make it an essential business, but then some of the cities that we operate in said, well, we're not ready for that.
Did they eventually change that?
They did eventually change that, but it took a while. I mean, it was a couple months with cities like Portland and Brunswick,
right.
Where they eased parts of the regulations and parts of the rules. So what happened, I liken it to a couple experiences in my life is, when there were times when I was in New York and working in New York City and living in the suburbs, and New York City got closed for one reason or another. Potential riot, potential terrorists, whatever it was. There were things that happened in New York. It was kind of crazy. But the worst thing was knowing that you're stuck there and you can't leave. You can't go home. And the first time it happens to you, you're like, wow, that's terrible. The second time it happens to you, you're like, I can't believe I let that happen to me again. And for me, it happened 3 times. And the third time, you say, I'm never going to let that happen to me again. And I think that's what happened with people when they were locked down during COVID. They said, we need a place to go if we have to get out of here. And Maine was very attractive, right? Maine had the lowest COVID incidence in the country, right. 2020 and most of 2021, and just a couple of flashes more recently, but still very, very, very safe COVID-wise on a relative basis to the rest of the country. So, and also people wanted to be driving distance, right? So if you're in New York City, you can drive to Boston. Boston had the same problems New York City did. Right. And so, and a bunch of people, like New Hampshire had the same thing that Maine had. They had a big influx of people from Boston and New York, like we did. And I think that it was people saying, I have to have a safe place that if I have to get out on any given day, I can jump in the car, I can drive there, we can stay there for a season, we can stay there for the year, we can ride out COVID. And then as things changed and remote work became easier, more accepted, more people decided to stay. I don't think people necessarily knew what they were going to do with some of these houses when they first bought them. At first, I think it was just an escape capsule. Yep. And then it became, well, let's enjoy our time here. And it's like, wow, this is a great place to live. Let's stay. And I'll continue to work remote. And so that's really what sort of transpired. But I think it was just people hate to be locked up. They hate to be locked out. They hate to feel like they have no option but to stay locked in their apartments in New York City.
It's a big difference between being locked up in Cape Elizabeth,
right,
in your home, versus locked up in New York City in your two-bedroom, right, I don't know, 1,500 square foot
Gets
apartment.
very small very quickly.
Oh my!
Can
you imagine having kids, like 3 kids under the age of 10 or something like that, and a wife, and you're both trying to work? I can't imagine.
Well, I have a daughter who lives and works in Washington D.C. and she was in a 1-bedroom apartment, during COVID, right on Washington, Massachusetts Avenue in Washington D.C. And she was locked up for a lot of that, and you get a little stir crazy.
Sure do.
And she came home for a couple of months, which was awesome. And that really broke it up for her. Yeah.
Did you charge her rent?
We didn't charge her rent. But she doesn't charge us for rent when she's in D.C. either. Yeah, because we love to visit her.
Listen, you're managing 90 to 100 brokers. It's got to be a lot like herding cats, I would say. How do you do that? And how do you make sure all the brokers are in compliance with the state rules and regulations?
Well, two very different questions. So it's not that hard. And it's not that hard from the herding cats perspective because we're very selective about who we have on our team. Yeah. So you asked me earlier, what do I do that's different? I have zero tolerance for disruption. Disruptive people.
And you always have those people in an organization.
You do, but we don't. And we've had a few over the years, and we dealt with them. One or two individuals can disrupt a whole organization.
It's like a cancer.
It's like a cancer. It can disrupt an office. It can disrupt a culture, and we don't need that. We don't need that. So, and it doesn't matter. When I first said that to people, and I said, you'll just use that to, fire bottom producers. The first 2 people I had to ask to leave were top producers. One was the number 1 producer in the company at the time, but just so disruptive to what we were doing, and it was a very short period of time. I don't have a long fuse for disruptive people. So it's not herding cats. The compliance thing is I have a big team. So I have someone in every office that reviews every contract, flags it for me, flags it for the agent, flags it for the client. Our compliance is really quite good. I mean, we try very, very hard to do everything and everything. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed.
You want to do that for your customers and your
do.
clients, but you also want to do it for yourself because the cost of not doing that, God forbid,
right,
if you do something wrong, is very high.
Yeah, we take that very seriously.
Yeah. Conflicts between brokers, I'm sure that never happens on the residential side of things, but you folks are a single company. Legacy Properties is a single company. The brokers are independent contractors. How do you handle conflicts between brokers? Because brokers always think they're right.
Right. So, again, if I have 1, 2, at the most I can think of going back in time, 3 inter-agent conflicts within my company in a year, that's a lot. I would say last year there were none. This year there's been 1, which was unfortunate. But it's, again, part of our culture. I mean, if there is a small problem, generally speaking, the agents work it out themselves. If it gets to me, it's usually a bigger problem. And I sit down, I listen, and I adjudicate fairly. And it's never really, it's not been an issue, and it's not very time consuming on my part. I spend very little time on that.
That's great.
And that's a welcomed part of my job.
I know our listeners and viewers would love to hear some real estate war stories. Anything in particular come to mind?
There's so many war stories, and they're all, each property is so unique, so different. I mean, right now the wars, if you will, is for buyers being first in line, getting properties under contract. because there's some buyers out there that have been trying for 3-4 months. Some of them have jobs here. Some of them are commuting. Some of them are staying in hotels. Some of them, are thinking about they may not be able to stay here because they can't find an appropriate place to live where they can raise their families. And so that's a super challenge for us. I mean, the war stories now are how we're able to leverage our expertise and get those properties under contract for our clients. And it's more than just writing an offer. I mean, a lot of it in the commercial business is so much that way. It's relationships. Right. Is the agents at other firms or the listing agents know our agents. They know they're honest. They know they're hardworking. They know they're fair. And they know if they bring a client with an offer, they're going to get to the closing table. And that's worth something. Is that certainty now has become the big issue. It's one thing to make a big offer and then put a inspection clause and a week later come back and want $25,000 off what you just offered. But I think that there's that integrity and knowing how we do business that really helps us.
So how do you get, let's say you've got a buyer for a property, one of your agents. How do they coach their buyers to stand out?
Well, it's different. It's different on every deal.
Right.
I mean, at some level, it's always about the money, right? At some level. But
right.
I've heard from a couple agents in the last couple of weeks where we didn't have the best offer, money-wise. Might have been second or even third.
But certainty of closure.
But we had certainty of closure, and we were able to provide that certainty of closure. And also it's looking at, is it maybe not having home inspections, or maybe not making home inspections a contingency of closing.
Or financing.
Or financing. Financing is still a big bugaboo with sellers. It's still hard if you're someone who has to take out a mortgage to get a property under contract.
Because the seller doesn't know for 45 days. Really.
They might not, really, right? They might not.
I've heard stories where a buyer will send in pictures of the family and the grandmother and the dog. And do you see that? And
I'm sure those stories are true.
Does that help at all?
And it's been something that's been sort of widely practiced over the years. The National Association of Realtors has really kind of put the kibosh on that. And under whether it's fair housing or what have you. But
interesting.
Yeah, and so as an agent and agencies, we now hear from listing agents and sellers saying, we call them love letters, don't want any love letters. And agents really don't want to necessarily be part of love letters. Now, we have had some buyers go directly to the sellers and write them letters personally and things, and that's not ideal either. But I think some of the deals that have come together that weren't just about money were relationships. The buyer knows the seller, the buyer's family knows the seller's family. They went to the same college, they're in the same business, a doctor selling to a doctor.
Sure.
There are those kinds of connections. It still kind of will transcend just the money.
Especially in a place like Maine.
Especially in a place like Maine.
Where everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, everybody knows everybody. And, people, again, they want their legacy in their home, no pun intended, to kind of carry on. They love the way they lived in the house that they're selling. Oftentimes, they're downsizing or moving out of state or retiring, and someone coming in who was their age when they bought the house,
yeah.
or in the same business or from the same hometown somewhere else in the world or what have you. And that can be really powerful, really important.
Tell me what you see for residential real estate here in Portland and Maine in the coming years.
Yeah. Well, let's start with this year. This year, so every day I have a friend or a neighbor or someone send me an article from somewhere saying the real estate bubble is bursting and real estate prices are going to crash and unit volume is. We have so much demand. Maine is such a small real estate market, right? Last year there were 20,000 homes that sold in the whole state in a whole year. That's not a lot. Yeah. It's a really small market. And now we probably have 2,000, 2,500 homes for sale, active for sale in the whole state. Normally that would be 15,000.
Yeah.
Something like that. And we'd have a 90-day supply. Now it's a week supply, and that's only because it takes a few days to get people in and out of there to get the best price. But it's so, even if the whole world crashes, it's going to be hard to slow down Maine for a while. You know, we're still seeing 10, 12 offers on nice properties that are well priced in good locations.
I mean, a lot of people, I hear people say, well, you know, is 2008 going to repeat itself?
Right.
And what I say to people is, I don't think so, because the buyers today, they're actually occupying their homes.
Right.
They're not buying them as investments so much as they want a place to live. So even if it hits the fan, these people are going to be living in their home. Yeah. And they're not dependent on being able to flip it again or whatever. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement. I mean, there's been a material, so for so many years, maybe forever, you know, people from away looking to move here with summer only. Yes. Right? For 9 months a year, Maine is this dark subarctic tundra that you just can't go to, and you know, it's uninhabited and all this stuff. And now they come here like, wow, you know, I can't believe I waited this long. And so that demand, it may slow down. You know, what was interesting about this market too is if you look at statistics historically, you know, Cumberland County's always been very strong. York County's always been very strong. Knox County's been strong. Lincoln County's been strong. Hancock County. But as you move sort of off the coast, it was a mixed bag. I was just looking at the trailing quarter statistics. Every single county in the state showed a price increase. Right? And so what's different about this is people are going everywhere, and they're pursuing all different kinds of lifestyles and all different kinds of places, you know, whether it be hiking and camping and fishing in the north and in the west or what have you. It's been a really deep change in the way people look at living in all of Maine, and that's unusual. Now, I've been saying for a while that even if these cash buyers disappear one day, which isn't going to be for a while, there's this whole backlog of people that need to finance or need to sell a home to buy a home that really have been largely kept out of the market. So we would have that sort of backup demand even when the cash offers go away. But you know, with interest rates going up, and they've gone up quite a lot, you know, some of those people who have to finance might not be participating in that backlog.
Because the interest rates go up, the amount that they can afford to pay for a home goes down.
Yeah, it just makes it less affordable. It does. Higher interest rates do drown people out of the marketplace.
But you know, Maine really has been discovered. I mean, for years, it made no sense to me that Cape Cod, for example, or the North Shore of Boston, they were getting these huge prices down there. Yeah. And all you had to do was go an hour north. Right. And come to Maine or Portland, where you got the symphony and you got the islands, and it didn't make sense that Maine hadn't been discovered earlier, but it certainly has. Oh,
when I first moved here, I mean, I thought it was going to be great, but it was so much better than that. You know, Maine I just think has never really invested in its brand. You know, it's lobsters and blueberries and toothpicks, right? And baseball bats and a few other things that we do well. But the lifestyle here, you know, I mean, two traffic light cycles is considered a traffic jam. You know, and
I mean, it takes you 10 minutes to get to work in the morning.
Yeah. I can do it in less, but sometimes it's 12, depending on the lights. But it's much more than I thought it would ever be. And you know, it was probably 3 or 4 years ago. We sold the property to a Californian, and I went over to meet him, and it was a nice property, really nice location, great view. And he said, you know, Chris, do you ever get tired of the views here? And I laughed because I said, you know, I said at the time I lived here for 16 years. So, you know, I've been living here for 16 years. I was out walking my dog this morning. I took 10 photos. I said, it's like every day you pinch yourself. Yeah. And I still do that.
Unlike your days at DLJ, where I assume that you took your business home, you know, mentally anyways, are you able to shut off what you do here at Sotheby's when you go home?
You know, it's a really good question. So when I came home from DL, first of all, I was rarely home to begin with, and so there really wasn't much shut-off time. I mean, you know, on a good night, I might get home at 8 o'clock and go to bed at 10. On a bad night, I get home at 10 o'clock and go to bed at midnight, and then be up and out the next morning at 5:30.
That's insane.
Yeah, it was insane. But funny enough, because it was so much, I was able to shut off for the most part. Whereas now, you know, this business is just part of my life. I take calls all hours of the day. I have meetings all hours of the day. but I also have time to enjoy my family and time to enjoy time with my wife, and so, it just kind of blends in.
But you also like it.
I like it. It's engaging.
Yeah.
What we do is I love people and I love houses, but I also understand that
You'll never make it.
I'll never make it. But it's a lot more than that, and it's what I funny enough, and this was a big part of my former life, is it's a lot of crisis management, and I'm pretty good at it, and I really like it, and I really like, trying to look at a problem that we're trying to solve, and navigating through the issues for the best way to bring both parties together,
right,
in an amicable way, and solve what was seemingly a couple hours ago insurmountable, and getting us back on track.
Yeah, and particularly in the residential side of the business, emotions play such a big role.
Yes, they do.
In the decision making and how people react to whatever information they're getting, or
They do.
it can be difficult. You're almost a psychologist,
Right.
or maybe even a psychiatrist.
Can't prescribe medicine. Yeah.
Chris, just to kind of wrap things up here, you're 59, right?
59. Yep. Be 60 in August.
Okay. 10 years from now, where do you see yourself?
10 years from now. So,
Or do you know?
it's interesting. Again, I love your questions, but so about 6 months before I left my job in New York, the company had hired financial planners. So it's sort of the cobbler's kids have no shoes. Is people who like me were working around the clock, had very little time to manage our own,
Sure.
retirements, and we were young. I was 37 years old, 38 years old at the time. Is they hired a financial planner, and the first thing a financial planner does when you sit down with them, and I had a very nice woman, was very accomplished, said, you have to pick a retirement date. I said, I'm 38 years old. I said, I could see doing this for another 40 years. She said, well, no one does it that long. And I said, well, I guess my point is I don't see ever stopping, because I love it. And 6 months later, I was looking to move to Maine. So, I love what I'm doing. It's engaging, it's energetic. I love the people I do it with. I'm very, very happy with my team, both from an agent perspective and a staff perspective. Really good people doing really good things. I love the fact that they're really talented, but they're also, again, for me, that mutual respect piece is really what brings our culture together. Right. They respect each other. They love each other's success. As opposed to, success can also be pretty intimidating. It can cause friction. We have so many people who are so successful at a very high level that it just becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the answer is that I don't know. In 10 years, I could be sitting here with you, and we could be doing another one of these, talking about what happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah, I'm not going to be. I got a couple of years on you.
I figure I'm a young 60. I'll presumably be a young 70.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll see.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for sitting down with us at the Boulos Beat and having a conversation about Sotheby's legacy properties.
Thank you for
Really
inviting me.
appreciate
I
it.
think your program is great. I think the whole thing you're doing has just been fantastic, and getting the word out there on all the interesting things going on in Maine. So I appreciate the invite.
Thank you. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you for being our guest today on the Boulos Beat, a Boulos Company podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us. You can learn more about Legacy Properties, Sotheby's International Realty at the company's website, which is legacysir.com, and on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at LegacySIR. If you'd like to learn more about the Boulos Company, please be sure to visit us at www.boulos.com. You can also find us at the Boulos Company on Facebook and LinkedIn, and at the Boulos Co. on Instagram and Twitter. And lastly, if you want to know the secret to owning real estate, it's pretty simple. Just be sure to outlive your debt.